Yeah, people don't want to hear you talking to yourself. It gets weird.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia here. I'm here reading you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. And this week on the show, I am going to be talking about 10 new LitRPG episodes just for you. This is of course episode 83 of the podcast, and if you're watching this on the video version, you actually notice that the format's a little bit different this time. That's because we have a guest commentator on this particular episode, Charles Dean. He missed being on the show so much. He was like, Ramon, let me be on again, please. I'll do whatever it takes. And so he's on the show. So everyone say hello to Charles Dean, author.
Whatever it takes.
Author,
you're not going to charge me for this, are you?
No, not on the front end. Maybe in the back end. But yeah. So Charles, thanks for coming on the show. You have a couple books. You have a couple of series. You want to talk about those real quick? Just like mention them so that people know that you're a LitRPG author.
Oh yeah, I've got the series The Bathrobe Knight, which was my first endeavor. A fun story about how that was actually written. The second series I've got was Merchant of Tikpa, and if you haven't read The Bathrobe Knight or Merchant of Tikpa, but you want to try something out that doesn't involve a random guy wandering around, and there's a series called War Eternus as well. And we'll actually be coming out with an audiobook soon, hopefully. Perfect.
So great information. Again, thanks for being on the show to comment on stuff. Honestly, this is going to be a little weird just because I'm not used to having people on the actual normal podcast show where I review stuff. So this is going to be an interesting experience for everybody all around. So Charles will be like commenting when he feels like it. He does have some specific comments for the last review we have on the podcast. But the things we'll be reviewing this week are including Star Warrior, also the Dungeon Player, and after that it'll be Alpha Test, Subject 3435, a Roguelike LitRPG Adventure, Chronicles Alamor, Book 1. These long titles always get me. Also after that it'll be Quest for Camlan, Camlan Realm Book 1. After that it'll be the Drachma Killers, The Last Warrior of Unigaea, Book 2.
Is that how you say it?
I think so. There's an I there.
Unigaea. Like I got to be honest. How many times do you mess up the pronunciation of a word on the show, and you hear from like an author later, like it's not bathroom, it's bathrobe.
Once, and that was you.
No. I mean, like other than me, like you've ever messed these up, and then you get commented from the authors?
No, I don't. Like they probably don't care that I say their book name wrong, maybe their actual names occasionally, but no, actually maybe one other time. It was for the oh god, I'm not going to say it now, but it's one other author did it for him once. But yeah, there's an A in there. There are two A's in there, so I think it's Unigaea, but I'm guessing. After that it'll be The World Keeper, Dawn of an Era. After that it'll be Under the Black Flag, Epic. It's Fayroll Book 6. After that'll be Eden's Gate, The Sands, which is Book 3 in that series. After that'll be Wounded Legion, a mech LitRPG, Armored Souls, Book 2. And last but not least, the 10th book we'll be reviewing is the Greystone Chronicles, Book 2, The Dire Lands. So we have 10 LitRPG reviews for you. But of course, we begin the show though with LitRPG news. And okay, and LitRPG news, we're going to begin with Alamor Kong. He has announced in a recent Facebook post that Book 7 in the Can of Seeds series will be delayed once again. Yes, I know. We're all very sad that this keeps getting delayed. But remember, he's a doctor. He actually has like a real job in which he pulls like 12, 13, 14-hour shifts. And apparently it's keeping him extra busy. He mentioned this in a Facebook Live post the other day, and I think he was actually on his way to work at the time, because when he flips the phone around, I think he's in front of a hospital. So there is no firm release date for this. He says so it's about 80% done, edited. He just has to finish the last 20%. Again, this is supposed to be a 1,000-page novel, apparently. So it's a massive endeavor at this point. Like that's easily 2 or 3 other regular sized books. So I'm like, okay.
By Amazon standard, that's 300,000 words.
Yeah, or 2,000.
Well, 325, because I know my book was 150 and it came out at 460.
Yeah, it's really weird, and that'll be one of the things that comes up in the reviews. Like it posts as like 800 pages. I'm like, oh, that's probably not correct. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also in LitRPG news, though, we have Arthur Stone's The God of the Second World, which is the weirdest noob book 3 in that series. Apparently there's some issues with it when it came out initially. When it was originally released, it was up for pre-order for a really long time, and when it originally went out to people, apparently the publisher uploaded the wrong copy of the book. They uploaded their not fully edited book. It had notes from the translator and from the editors and conversation pieces. And people were either very amused by that or just really annoyed that it was not the actual correct copy. They very quickly fixed that with Amazon, within hours of them being told that it was the case. And they released a link to people who had already purchased it for the correct version of it. And as far as I'm aware, the correct version is currently up on Amazon. But it is a very interesting story because I know this happened to several publishers before. And even the case, one of the Russian authors sent me that copy of it as an advanced copy. And I'm like, oh, these notes are not for me at all. I had to delete it and send it back. So one of those things, but again, apparently has been corrected. So you can go purchase if you wish to. Okay. Also, a couple LitRPG deals for you folks at home if you're interested in getting some good stuff. Delvers LLC Welcome to Ludus is currently on sale until December the 4th for 99 cents. So go grab that. We'll have a link in the show notes for you guys. Also, the first book in the Omegaverse series by G.R. Cooper is going to be on sale until December the 3rd, also for 99 cents. And just remember, folks, when you actually own a copy of these ebook versions, sometimes Audible will give you a heavy discount on the audiobook versions of those. So I know Delvers LLC has an audiobook version, and I already own a purchased copy, and it goes from 20 to $6 or $7, sometimes even less for the audiobook version of it. So pick it up even if you already have read it and you want an audiobook version. Sometimes it's cheaper. Okay, so on to stories that are out now.
Isn't Delvers coming out with a new book soon?
Delvers.
I saw the new cover. He had a new cover on the site.
Yeah, book 3 just came out. Soon. Yeah, book 3 just came out. So not too long ago. He actually has a new series coming out for Delvers LLC. It's going to be the Nora series. And it's a completely different character, and it's going to be its own series set in the same world in the Ludus world, and that's going to eventually connect back. I'm sorry, what was that? Like Merchant of Tikva was to the Bathrobe Knight. Yeah, very much so. It's the same kind of concept. Separate storylines that may eventually connect at some point in the future, and that's what Blaze Corbin is currently working on.
Can't wait to see the zebra ride.
Yeah, that is an interesting part of the cover where they have zebra riders. Zebras are very hard to tame, apparently. But if you can do it in some of the world.
It's not that they were hard to tame necessarily, because natural selection would have worked it out eventually. It's just that compared to horses, it would have been a pain. So it's take the easier road always.
Yes, and that's yes, I agree with you as far as I'm aware. Okay, some of the books that are out currently. Other books that are currently, we have Into the Black Sky, Book 6, Dimias Nights by Stuart Gross. We won't be reviewing this novel or this series just because this series had some rape stuff in there. I'm okay, I'm not going to review that, but people are adults, go read it. I know some people really enjoy it. And Stuart Gross's game mechanics are really pretty top notch. So go enjoy it, guys. We're just not going to review it on the show. Also out, we already talked about the third book in the Weirdest Noob series that is out currently. The Dungeon Soul Book 3 Adventures of Brad is also out as well, as is Daggerland Online, the second book in that series of the Infinite Assassin series. Also out. Also, it's The Lewd Shadowmancer, The Concubine Contract by Eden Reed. I'm going to give this one a read, even though I know there are going to be some naughty parts in there. The author is very much does sex novels. And so there's going to be some sex in there, but she has posted on the Facebook that this is her first attempt at a really crunchy LitRPG novel with a bunch of numbers, and I'm going to give it a try, and I'll let you guys know how it goes. I might blush the whole time, but I'll read it again. So there you go. Let's see what else. Oh, that's it for stuff that's out that I haven't reviewed. New LitRPG audiobooks. There are a couple, including J.A. Cipriano's The Builder's Pride, Legendary Builders, Book 3. And did I miss one of the novels, Charles? Dakra what? I missed.
I misheard what you were saying.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, then I'll move on. Sorry. Also out in audiobook is Spawn Point. This is the second book in the Next World series that is also out as an audiobook. That's a slightly older LitRPG series. But it's nice that they're putting out an audiobook version of it. Let's see. Also in upcoming LitRPG, this is just the part where I read off all the names of the things that are coming out to you folks at home. Charles can't see the pictures, which is sad for him because it's just him looking at me talk. But for the folks who are watching the video version of this, you can see all the pictures. And upcoming is on December the 2nd, Apocalypse Gate, Book 1, which is written by Daniel Schienehofen. He writes the Alpha World series, and this is a new series from him. I actually have two versions out, the Not Safe for Work version and the PG-16 edition are both actually currently out for pre-order, so you can pick those up, but they'll be out on December the 2nd. The Land, Book 7 will be out at some point. It was slated for December the 3rd. Now it's slated for sometime in December. So there you go. We talked about that. Book 4 of the Mirror World series called Twilight Obelisk will be out on December the 4th. On December the 4th as well, it'll be the Starry Skies of Darkhan, Realm of Archon Book 6 by Gia Killa. If you're familiar with the Realm of Archon series, it'll be fun for you. We finally have a cover art for Michael Chatfield's Emerillia Book 11. That'll be out on December the 5th. It'll be called Empire Burning, and that's the last one in that series. So that'll be sad to see go. But it's been a fun ride, if nothing else. Let's see, also out on December the 13th, it'll be Don Chapman's Desert Storm, Pateria Online Book 3. On the 21st of December, it'll be Depth of Camlan, a LitRPG adventure, Camlan Realm Book 2. We'll be reviewing the first book in that series on this particular episode of the podcast. On January the 17th, it'll be Book 3 in the Dark Herbalist series, A Trap for the Potentate. I'm not sure what a potentate is, but there's a trap for him. On January the 24th, it'll be The Reapers, which is the Nero Book 3. And that's all the stuff coming up that I'm aware of. On to new releases and reviews.
You pretty excited about the Dawn book?
Music. Sorry, that's that transitionary music, man. What'd you say?
Are you pretty excited about that Dawn book? I like her stuff.
Oh, about Don Chapman's book?
Yeah, every time Don Chapman puts something out, I always want to put a little blurb of it, but then Blaze and everybody else always beats me to it. It's somebody else beats me to it. So I see 50 of them and I never put a job.
Sure. Have you read
I'm pretty excited about her having another one out.
Have you read the Paternia Online series that she's written so far? Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the next one.
Good. As long as you're enjoying it, that's the important part. I've reviewed the first two in the series, and they never quite get a 7 for me. They always get 6s, and it's just because there's limited game mechanics in there, just because of the way the world's set up. Because it's from the NPC's point of view, so it makes sense that there's going to be limited game mechanics that apply towards the NPC, but there is stuff there like quests and whatever. But there's always something that just not quite. I'm like, oh man, you had to put that in there. And in book 2 it was that 75% twist there. At that point, 3/4 in the novel, there's this weird twist. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And it kind of,
I know what you're talking about. I don't want to go into spoilers, so I won't say it, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah.
I did think it was a little bit, let's not say that there was a sharp jump at some point, but it felt like they were doing something different. And
no. Yeah. But
I have to say, as an author, when I read something like that, because I wonder if somebody's reading something of mine and thinking the exact same thing. And I'm just like, man, I have probably ruined somebody's day worse than what's happening to me when you're reading a book, which when I'm reading a book, I am that character. I am the person in the book. So if something bad or if a twist happens that disconnects me, it is a very emotionally jarring experience. I have to be like, I need another drink.
Yeah.
It is a terrible moment.
Yeah. But as far as her writing goes, her writing is always really nice. Yeah. Her writing is always really nice. And I always appreciate the way she writes. She's definitely a better writer than I am as far as her sentence structure, the way it flows. I'm always impressed by the quality of her work. It's just that some of her story choices, I'm like, I might not be the right audience for this sometimes, or that's an interesting choice. And I put in the review, so it's not like it's a big secret about what I think of the series. But I know a lot of other people really do enjoy it. So I'm like, okay, good for you guys.
Yeah, I wasn't going to pick up her series at all when I first saw it, and I didn't. And then I actually had a chance to talk to the author, and wonderful person. So I was like, you know what? I'll do this person the justice of reading their book. And then 4 hours later, I was like, really? This is it? Come on, where's the next one? Like, why are you doing this to me?
Well, that's good. I'm glad that, like I said, really good writing style, and I really do enjoy it. But some of the things, like, okay, like not every novel's for everybody. So that it is what it is. Like you can check out the reviews for that particular series at LitRPGPodcast.com in our review section if you want to actually know what we're talking about. Or you can pick up a book. That's always another way to do it. They're not really long. They're short stories, folks. Okay, but on to actual new releases and reviews. We're going to begin our first review with Star Warrior, written by Isaac Hook, who is apparently a prolific sci-fi author. Like he has like 15, 20 sci-fi stories in his Amazon page. I'm like, oh, I was genuinely curious to see what this was going to be about. We'll begin with it's listed on Amazon for 812 pages. I don't know that is correct. It certainly didn't feel that long, but that's what Amazon lists as this recording of the particular podcast. It is 499 pages. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. In a galaxy where the fabric of reality can be bent and shaped by a privileged few, and almost any skill desired is a mere injection away, one man is thrust into the fight of his life. Tane, a hydroponics farmer with some mad cereal crop gene splicing skills, decides to get chipped. The operation gives him full control over his autonomic nervous and endocrine systems, plus the ability to install custom memories. All seems well until a couple days later, aliens come knocking at his door, and they aren't the friendly type. Soon Tane finds himself in a frenzied fight across the galaxy with the woman who can warp the very fabric of space-time, her bodyguard, who just as soon kill Tam than protect him, and a starship that calls him snarky pet names. He's on the run not simply from the aliens, but the whole damn human space navy. He only wishes he knew why. Ultimately for Tane, the answer just might destroy him, not to mention the entire known universe. And if you look at the cover art for this, I'll actually share this with you because this is part of the review.
You feel like a Disney lawsuit will hit?
Here's the actual cover art for this particular one. So you can see this. This is the original cover. This is the one that's actually out now, Star Warrior. This was the original cover art. This one right here, in the bottom right-hand section.
Disney lawsuit in the making.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I see why he changed it. But at the same point, I'm like, that definitely reflects the. It definitely reflects the Star Wars influence that's going on, and the like I said, this is the author's first lit RPG endeavor. He posted the reason why I'm reviewing it is because in the Amazon section he doesn't list it as lit RPG. There's no mention of RPG mechanics in the description or in the title, but the author did post about his novel on the Facebook groups in lit RPG Facebook groups. So he says it is. He actually described it as. Mixing some Star Wars in your lit RPG, and he said this is his first lit RPG endeavor. So I'm like, okay, we'll give it a shot. Like I said, from the original cover book art, for the folks who are watching the video version of the podcast, you can see that there's definitely that Star Wars influence there. Maybe a little too much for some people. The story is basically about a farm boy who's whisked away by a princess type and a smuggler. He discovers he's more than what he thought he was, and eventually wields a lightsaber-like weapon. In the novel, they're all.
He started off on a hydro farm.
He starts off on a farm that seems to be very desert-like.
Yeah, I mean, no. He said it was a hydro farm in the description. Like, could that be a moisture farm?
It could be. I guess he's a hydroponics farmer.
Is there an empire anywhere nearby?
There is a military faction that is chasing him throughout some of the novel. They're not necessarily.
Are they good at shooting? That's the real question. Like. Did they fail to kill him because they were using swords, or did they have crossbows or arrows or something that they just weren't able to actually land a shot with?
They do seem to miss an awful lot in these space battles. That's all I can say about that. But yeah, there's definitely a Star Wars vibe to it, and there's a lot of references. I'm not sure whether they're because there's a couple ways. This is from a guy who does a lot of referencing pop culture stuff, movies, television in his novels. Like I do a lot of that stuff. I do. But in this particular novel, I was never sure whether it's a nod or if it's kind of taken from the plot. And I'm like, whether it's parody or not. It's hard to distinguish because some of the plot is literally, that farm boy is awfully a lot like that other farm boy from that other franchise. And he's going on.
And there was a princess.
Yeah, going along with a princess and a smuggler. She's not really a princess. She's a Valerian witch or something, but it's like very princess-like quality.
Wait, is the word Valerian?
I want to say Valerian. It's like I can't remember how he spells it, but I'll say Valerian for now.
You know that like the movie that Star Wars was a ripoff of the comic of?
No. Oh no, I remember. I think I've seen. I know the comic you're talking about. So yeah, lots. I said there are nods and then there are not nods in the story. But this is not a total rebuff of Star Wars. I'm not saying that it is, but there are a lot of references. We'll say it that way. But there are also a lot of original points to the story. So there are self-aware AI robots. There's interdimensional aliens, space tech, and magic powers that use the essence of the universe. Each is well explained. What was that?
Are there lasers?
There are lasers. And there are light swords that use the essence of the universe.
Are they like real lasers, or are they like those weird like soccer ball slow lasers that you see in Star Wars?
It's a novel. I can't tell how fast they go. Sorry. But like I said, there are the sci-fi parts of the story are actually legitimately good. They're well written. They're well described. And you can tell the author has a lot of sci-fi writing experience. Like all the sci-fi stuff, I'm like, I have no issues with that. I enjoy the techno explanations of culture, of like new technology, of galactic history, all that stuff that you would expect in a good sci-fi novel, right? The issues I kind of have are how to do with the other parts of the story. The plot is unfortunately, at least to me, very predictable. And that's mostly because you're comparing it to Star Wars. And so some of the plot's going to be very similar. And so that's going to ruin some of the story for some people. The moment the author mentioned that there was light and dark essences in this particular world that people use for magic powers and space technology, I'm like, okay, it seems pretty obvious where this story is going and it went exactly where you think it is. There were some really good space battles. The end is very action filled, but like I said, overall, for me at least, the story was kind of predictable. Like I said, the sci-fi aspects are well written. Unfortunately, the thing that was lacking in the story is the RPG mechanics, the RPG part of LitRPG. And that's not to say that they don't exist in the story, folks. They're just rare. And they're not really detailed once you get past the beginning of the story. Most of the RPG stuff is explained in the first 3% of the novel, when the main character gets an implant in his brain that gives him an augmented reality view of the world and allows for nano upgrades to his mind and body. Again, this is kind of the sci-fi explanation of RPG mechanics. And with the implant, the main character has a character sheet he can see that has attributes, and he can have assigned numbers to it that show his proficiencies in those areas. He can also purchase nano injections that will increase those attributes or upload whole new skills to his mind. So this is kind of the way of justifying sci-fi wise, oh, how can you just learn a skill by pressing a button or buying a thing, right? Or the new skills showing up on your character sheet when you're just learning something. So I really did enjoy the way that the author kind of justified these RPG mechanics, saying, oh, magic wand, game stuff. He's like, oh no, here's a science-ish explanation of everything, including like an inventory system. Like he described it as a pocket dimension that people have access to, and they can take things in and out of it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. However, all that happens in the first 3% of the novel. After that, those game mechanics sort of disappear, or at least they're not as prevalent as I would have expected from that beginning portion of it. The most common game mechanics that you see are the AR, the augmented reality augmentation, where the main character can see people's names and their levels and like their class. Or an item description. When you look at an item, there'll be like a little game notification in the text saying, oh, this is what it is, this is the damage, etc. And that's mostly what you see. Unfortunately, there is not much of a progression in this. And that's part of what, at least for me and for a lot of the readers, we enjoy the most about LitRPG is that sense of progression that the character has. He does a thing, he gains power, skills, and whatever, and he gradually gets more and more powerful. And that just doesn't exist very much in the story. Like there's literally, I can name 4 or 5 places where the main character increases in power according to the game mechanics that are set in the world. In a couple places, he buys nano upgrades. He'll get a new skill, he'll get an attribute increase. And a few other places, he'll just like get a notification saying, oh, you learned this new skill. And literally there's like a handful of places where that occurs. Everything else is just read as straight sci-fi. And it was really disappointing to me when I read it because the foundation of a good lit RPG novel was just there. It was laid in that first 3% of the story. And there just wasn't a lot of follow through. I don't know why the author did, and I generally don't. I can only hypothesize. Maybe he fell back on his great sci-fi writing and that's what he's used to. So as he's storytelling, that's just where it went. The other possibility is that he has a very devoted sci-fi base. Like he literally has 15, 20 novels that are sci-fi related. And for a lot of authors who are coming from a different genre into LitRPG, they've said to me, like, I didn't want to alienate my current reader base. So I didn't want to include a bunch of game stuff. And I don't know that that's the case here, but it might have been. And Charles Dean, did you have a comment?
Oh yeah, I was going to say we have a phrase for that, or at least I've heard a lot of phrases for that. And because a lot of Korean novels, if you started LitRPG like I did, there was a ton of great Korean LitRPGs, and they would always start really, really good, peter out, and the further you got in, the less they would focus on the LitRPG, and You'd be like, wait, where are your levels and stuff? And so they actually have a phrase for this, and it roughly translates to dragon's head, snake's tail. And I always like that expression. It just seemed like really nice. Like, oh, you think you're getting a dragon, but then it's just a tiny little snake's tail. Like you've got none of the follow through.
Oh, is that what that meant? I always thought it was like, oh, the dragon his head is eating the tail, like going in a circle for infinity. But I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, it was like a giant beast that had this huge head of a dragon, and then the tail was just nothing but like a thin snake's tail because it just was nothing there.
Yeah. And that, like I said, as the novel goes on past the 3% mark, which is really good, it just peters out as far as the RPG mechanics, though. They're there. There is progression, so it is LitRPG technically. It's just that when I was reading this thing, it just kind of bugged me as both a reader and a writer, because I kept seeing so many places where there could be mechanics, RPG mechanics inserted, just the ones that the author's already established. I kept saying like, oh, he did a new thing. He's a farmer, but he's not in space now. So he's learning a bunch of stuff like spacewalking, using different weapons, using different technology, but he's not getting skills for them. And that didn't make sense in my brain, because it's really as simple as like inserting a text. Like, oh, look, more RPG mechanics and making people happy and like giving them that sense of progression. Or when he's learning the essence of the universe that permeates all things, the Force, there could have been like a cool skill tree, like, oh, these are your Force powers you can do. My mind kept going to things like the Knights of the Old Republic, which is a video game based on the Star Wars properties, where they have
the best video games ever.
One of the best ones, but definitely one of the better Star Wars games for sure. But those
I wouldn't say it's like the best. Like, it's not Planescape Torment, but it was definitely one of the better games I've ever played in terms of RPG story.
No, definitely in terms of like Star Wars games, it is probably one of the top two. At least for me. But that game really did a good job of like giving you those skill trees of like powers, and especially Force powers. And so just pulling that kind of information and putting into this novel would have been an amazing opportunity to expand LitRPG in a new direction, because nobody else has really done that kind of stuff before, like for those games anyways. But the author didn't. And I'm like, there was just a wasted opportunity as far as I was, as a reader and author. I was like, no, why didn't you? That's kind of what I kept saying to myself as I was reading this. Like I said, overall, sci-fi elements in the story, nice. They're well written. It's just that I was looking for a good RPG story, and this just wasn't it. And that's unfortunate case. So for Star Warriors, it gets a score of 5 out of 10 from me, and that is unfortunate. So there you go. Any comments before I go on?
Yeah, I'm just going to say I didn't read the thing because I looked at it and I was like, they didn't even bother to change the word star and war. Like, it's literally an S away from being what its picture entitles it to. And so I thought it was a joke. I didn't realize it was actually a book.
Yeah. Apparently.
I thought somebody was messing with us, and they were just like, oh, you're just, yeah, no.
No, it's definitely, it's a thing. Like I said, I appreciate the author taking a step out of his current genre, which is sci-fi, and attempting to write something in LitRPG. It's just like, you didn't go far enough. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of writers who are in other genres, who are in romance or in sci-fi or traditional fantasy, when they look at LitRPG and they see, oh, there's people buying stuff here, how do I get in that? And for an author who has an established genre community behind them, they're like, I'm doing decent here. Do I want to take the risk of alienating those people by writing something that I'm not sure they're like, this game stuff? And I've seen that again and again and again. And I wish I had a minute. So there you go. Okay. Next review, Dungeon Player, a LitRPG Dungeon Core Adventure, Glendaria Awakens Trilogy Book 1, really long title. It is written by Jonathan Brooks. This one is 141 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description, folks. Even after pre-ordering the pod that will allow them to play Glendaria Awakens, Krista and Devin still had to wait months before they were able to experience the newest VR MMORPG. technology. The wait was definitely worth it as they entered into a game world that was virtually indistinguishable from real life, apart from the obvious game elements, of course. After starting in a typical town, they learned everything they needed to survive in this new world. Journeying through the wilderness outside of town, the duo progressed at a good pace until they arrived at the starting dungeon, and their lives were drastically changed by the place with the unassuming name of Goblin Cave. Now, honestly, I think that would have been a better title for this, Goblin Cave, but, that's me. Okay, my review. This is kind of overpriced at $3.99 for 141 pages. I'm like, that's a little more than I would normally pay, but it is on Kindle Unlimited, so that kind of mitigates it if you're in that program. It's a good read if you have it, of course. This is a trapped in the game dungeon master LitRPG story. So that's a lot of words, folks, but it basically means that the two main characters get trapped in this virtual reality game. But they're not playing as normal characters. Instead, the main character, Krista, becomes a bodiless dungeon administrator, aka Dungeon Master, and Devin, the other character, becomes a special kind of dungeon master that can create a new character with new class and race combinations every time he dies and still keeps the levels he learned. So it's a twist on the Dungeon Master story, which I thought was kind of cool. The game mechanics of the story are really super detailed. There are a lot of tables in the story, like a lot, and pages and pages. And that for some of the comments, some of the reviews for the story kind of note that as being annoying to them. Me, I'm like, okay, this is a formatting thing that the author chose. And it is what it is. But personally,
I like it.
What was that?
I like the tables. They're really nice. The only thing I ever worry about with tables is how they'll translate into an audiobook. Like past that, the more tables, the better.
Yeah, but I mean, this one literally has...
Oh, no, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I've had a little bit of experience with this book. I've not finished it.
Oh, okay.
So don't spoil the ending for me. But so far, I'm going to say that more tables never takes away from the quality of a book.
No, and that kind of depends on your personality type. Like some people don't mind them at all, and they're like, okay, the more information, the better. I'm that kind of person. I like them too, but some other people are like, this is a lot of numbers, and I'm not a number person. So I think it's important that people are aware of that in case they're like, oh, that's not the kind of person they are. But for me, it was cool. I don't have a problem with it.
I don't understand that because they're so easy to ignore. Like, I know this is like a weird thing to say, and I'm sure there's going to be somebody griping and being like, well, he put a bunch of tables up there and he put it on Kindle Unlimited for free pages. And I respect like that criticism to a degree. But for me, is somebody who obsesses over numbers every day and tries to figure out how numbers work and spent maybe an entire weekend working on a D&D system, I'm going to say that more numbers is always appreciated. And I absolutely love when I see these tables in there. So when I saw some of these criticisms of this book, it actually encouraged me to pick it up. Like it was the opposite effect. I was like, you have too many tables and numbers in your book. Yeah. I'm just gonna grab that one right there. Let's start the download. Like,
no. Yeah, I heard you're saying. This is from a guy. I'm the guy. I'm the kid as a teenager who just read Dungeon Master and Dungeon Dragons manuals because of the numbers and the tables and the stats. They're all very comforting and interesting to me. So I personally like the information. I prefer to have more info than less. But I get that some people aren't that way, and I respect that. So that's why
you can skip over it. Like they weren't non-intrusive. Like I felt like if you totally just like every time you saw a table, if you just said, oh, you know what, I'm going to the next section, it wouldn't hurt your experience at all. Like that's how I felt.
No, I appreciate that as well. Some people can do it, some people just can't, and that's just the thing. So I respect it either way. But I do admit that some of the information probably could have been cut out. Like there's a lot of information about races you never see in the story or classes that you never see. And so like some of it was probably a little superfluous.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm cool with that. What was that?
We've never seen them yet. They could come up in the future.
They could, but that's the point where you want to see them. And if they're going to come up in book 2, you should probably put that information in book 2, not in book 1. You know what I mean?
Okay, I'll see that point.
And that's all it is. Like I said, other than that, as far as tables go, perfectly fine. You can actually tell the author put like a ton of work into the game mechanics. Like in some LitRPG stories, you can tell when an author is just kind of winging it. And they don't want to put in numbers because it's a hassle. And this was definitely not the case. Like the author puts in so much information. I'm like, oh man, this guy got into those game mechanics. And I always appreciate that just because it makes me feel like the author's putting in the hard work to make this as interesting as possible because this is something he enjoys doing. And I like that personally. let's see. I also like the fact that there's a character in the story that can kind of change classes and races with each incarnation. It was really cool to see because it allows for a variety of strategies and play styles. And even though it's not really used much, the ability for the dungeon to lure in new monsters has a lot of story potential, especially since the author says they're going to be doing a trilogy in the series. I see a lot of story potential in a lot of these game mechanics, which is always really cool. Things that I wasn't a fan of in the story, though. So these are things that I didn't like, or I just thought could have been done better. The way the author decides to define game terms is by use of a parentheses definition next to the term. And it was so annoying to me because, like, there are so many better ways of doing that. You know what I mean? Because it says, like, for example, it says in there, hey, Devin, hit it and try to take aggro. And then parentheses right next to it says, or attention, the monster will attack the player it considers to be the highest threat. And then ends parenthesis exclamation mark. And I'm like, I was like, oh, like that's like, it's just the way it's written breaks immersion for the reader. And the information could have been conveyed a number of other ways, including having a newbie character that asks questions about terms like, oh, I don't know anything. What's this aggro thing you said? And it's an opportunity for like some other character or the main character to say, oh, this is what it is. You can also use footnotes or a glossary in the back and just like let the people who are curious about the term just like hit a little button and go, and it goes to the end and you can give a full definition of it without breaking immersion for the other people. And I'm like, there's just a lot of ways of handling that. I'm like, okay, maybe the author just doesn't realize it. I'm like, that's fine. It's just one of those things that kind of popped up and I'm like, that could have been done better. Also, in the story, the two characters are stuck in the game world, but part of the plot is that they're trying to contact the outside world and they need to increase the level of the dungeon to get a chance to use the game's mail system. That's part of the plot. Like they're saying, oh, we have to get increase the dungeon level so we can go use the mail system. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Yet the whole premise of the story kind of falls apart if somebody remembers that to use the help function or to like call the game master. That would have solved the entire story. Or heck, why not just write on the wall of the dungeon saying, stuck here, need help? Because there's a constant stream of players come in. It's just one of those plot details like that. I was like, okay. And you, to a degree, you always have to suspend a sense of like disbelief or something when you read stories. But this just stuck out. I was like, there probably could have been other ways to at least try to solve this problem besides just ignoring these game functions. Small thing, I know. But the biggest issue I had with the story is probably the lack of stakes for most of it. This changes at the end. I'm not going to spoil it because Charles hasn't finished it. Not that I'd spoil it anyways. But for the most part, no matter what happens in the dungeon, the monsters, or even when the character Devin is assigned as a dungeon monster, there are no negative repercussions for anybody dying or losing. Whenever anybody dies, they get to respawn without any penalties. The character Devin, the special monster creature, he actually gets to keep any experience he earned, no matter how many times he dies. So I'm like, that's a little OP, but I get it. It's a dungeon. It's different than player system. The dungeon resources and the points that are spent for monsters and traps, they're automatically refunded to the dungeon when the dungeon is completed. Like there's no loss of points. And there's only a net gain possible from killing players. So I'm like, the stakes aren't really there for them to lose. So there's kind of a lack of tension because of that. This changes at the very end of the novel. Like it's literally the last sentence that changes it. I'm not going to say how. So I see it getting better in book 2, but it was just a thing for me. So I'm like, despite these small points though, it was really an entertaining read. I got to see how this dungeon grew, the possibilities for upgrades, the way the two main characters work together was kind of cute. I could see potentials for like a romance storylines later on. It really wasn't implemented here, but it was interesting. So for me, I had a good time with it. It gets a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Any comments?
Yeah, I'm going to say like one of the things you touched on is one of my biggest issues with about 50% of the lit RPGs I read is the lack of stakes. Like the idea that if you die, like there was one lit RPG I read recently that was incredibly good. Nice author. He wrote a story where if the main character died, he just lost a level at most.
Oh.
And I would sit there and I'd be like, okay, this guy can be killed over and over again. And all he's going to do is lose some EXP, which he can regain the next day and then go back to his bind spot. And it just felt like there was no tension. And the author had to work extra hard to bring some sort of tension to the field. And I mean, I've seen a lot of people address this really well, but when they don't address it at all, even though it is kind of like a gripe for me. At the other hand, I'm sitting here and I'm like, have you ever read a book where the main character died? Like, did you read Harry Potter and then in the middle of it, like at page 200 of 600, he just magically dies? So when I look at that, I mean, I have played a game like that. I've played a game where halfway through the game, your main character died, and then they just gave you a new MC, and then you were just like, this is your main character. But this was back like during the days of like Final Fantasy 4 through 6, like those old days. Mm-hmm. Past that, I've never seen it happen. So when I'm reading a story, I already have the lack of tension. Like I never worry about, oh, well, the main character is going to die in this fight. Nope, he's going to be perfectly fine. Which is why also I'm not going to spoil which book it'll happen, but there is one of my slated books where the main character will die, and then the next like 200 or 300 pages are just going to be blank. Like, ha ha ha. There'll just be nothing. Like, of course, I can't put that on Kindle Unlimited. They'd hit me with a scam. I'll have to just charge it like 99 cents for it. Yeah,
you can just put like somewhere like write the rest of your story, like in parentheses after he dies, like make it up. New character logged in.
Actually, War Eternus, I had the main character actually die in chapter 6, and then my editor got very angry with that. He was not happy with the main character. I didn't mean to give spoilers there, but yeah, the main character did die at two times during the book, and I got told that I was not allowed to do that because, and I quote, people don't like to see their dreams die. And I was like, it's not their dreams. They're just it's the reader. And then yeah.
And that's one of those weird things about our genre in general is that in LitRPG, depending on the game system you're using, sometimes dying is a learning experience. Like you can use it to, even if you have a penalty of like experience points or levels or whatever the case is, it's used as a way to learn, even if it's like the hard way of like knocking your head against something until you beat it. In other RPG stories, it's like, oh, there's permadeath. And so that's the tension. Like if he actually died, he's gone forever. And it just kind of depends. There are a lot of ways to create tension.
Banned from a game.
What was that?
Or banned from the game.
Yeah, banned from the game. Or like you can use social, economic pressures that are consequences for dying or for making whatever reputation changes there. There's a lot of ways to do tension. It's just that in this one there wasn't. And that's like, okay, it's a learning experience. I get it. This is apparently the author's first novel. So I'm kind of like, I'm not upset about it. It's just like, oh, these are things we as authors can learn from. And that's how I view most of these reviews. Like, oh, this is an opportunity for people to see or to say or to hear, maybe this can be done better. And that's what most of these are. Okay, on to our next review. This one is Alpha Test Subject 3435, a roguelite LitRPG adventure, Chronicles of Alamor, Book 1, written by Adam Meyer. I'm assuming it's Meyer, M-Y-H-R. Okay, this one is 201 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. The author's description: Frank is a nobody. He's struggling to be a somebody, and he needs cash. Frank applied to more than 100 clinical trials over the past year, getting into none until now. COA Inc. is highly secretive about their latest project. They've been advertising on college campuses and technology centers across the nation for paid volunteers. Hundreds of people have traveled throughout their clinics, and none have talked about what's going on. Frank didn't care. He showed up to the trial knowing he'd be in a simulation, nothing else. He certainly didn't count on getting trapped in that simulation. Now he just wants to get out. Okay. Again, 201 pages. The author describes this novel as a roguelike lit RPG. Now, as a video game, that means that the journey the character takes is procedurally generated, which means random. So that each run through the game is different. And you explore an area, you maybe get some items, you kill some monsters, you die, and you start a new game. That works very well for...
roguelike than that.
What was that?
Like a video game. It's more than just like random generation. Roguelike means that each generation is almost so identical that they feel the same even if they're different. Like when you hop through a Diablo 3 game and you're farming all these like dungeons one way down after the other, there's no point, like even though the mobs are random, even though the levels are random, you never sit there and think, oh, this is different. You're like, no, this is more of the same. I just got this particular random set and it feels identical. And I'm going to say that that's a perfect description for the book.
Thank you very much. We'll get into that in a second. Like I said, a roguelike system like that works well for a video game where the challenge is to just do better every time you play or to kill some time. This doesn't work well for a novel, though, and that's unfortunate. The novel's basically boring. And I hate to say that, but it really is. And like most of the reviews have some reflection of that theme. Reading the novel felt less roguelike and more Zork-like, at least for me. All the character in the story does is go to an area. He describes it in too much detail. He searches that area. Sometimes he finds an item. Sometimes he kills monsters. Sometimes he eats. And occasionally he'll do something that he gets a skill for, but that's kind of it. If the character dies, he just wakes up in a random location and he starts all over again. Walk, search, get item, kill monster, repeat endlessly. That is it. He doesn't even have people to talk to because the NPCs in the game they just spout lines that are repeated, so they're mindless, and so it's really just him describing stuff. And yes, the story is LitRPG. There's a game world with RPG mechanics. The character does progress according to the mechanics that are stated. He has a character sheet with stats and an inventory system. He gets experience points for exploring areas, killing monsters, even eating, which is weird to me. And he levels up eventually. He learns new skills and he can improve them, but that doesn't make it interesting. It's still it's a very boring story, and I wish it wasn't, and I didn't enjoy it, unfortunately. So it gets a score of 4 out of 10. So that's for me. So that's Alpha Test, Subject 3435, or Roguelike LitRPG Adventure, Chronicles of Alamor, with a score of 4 out of 10. Any comments from you, Charles?
Yeah, that's about how many pages I made it in. 4 out of 10.
Okay.
Like, I feel like between those two numbers, that's about how many pages I made it into the book, because I'm not going to actually insult the author. I think the author has a lot of talent. I think the author has some potential. I was happy that when you read LitRPG, generally, you have to read it with the understanding that there are going to be mistakes. You go in there and you're like, I'm expecting grammar problems. I'm expecting spelling problems. And my books have them too, so I'm not going to like diss on anyone who has them. I'm just saying, when you go into a LitRPG book, you know it's an indie series and you were expecting a ton of mistakes. I didn't see any. There might have been some. I didn't see any mistakes. I saw this well written. The descriptions were okay. By about 4 or 5 pages in, it just felt like I knew where this was going. And Roguelike, that's not exactly how many pages. I may have gotten a lot farther. This is hyperbole, but I will say that at a certain point, I looked at the title and I was like, I should have known what I'm getting. And this is clearly one of the early attempts, and I can't wait to see the author improve on this.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's a good attempt at trying something new. I give the author credit for doing so. It's just that it didn't work out in this particular instance. Like, maybe there'll be better iterations in the future, but this wasn't one of them. And nothing I ever said was meant to be insulting. When I say it's boring, I'm like, it just is. Like, I lost interest very quick in this story, and I had to force myself to read it. And to me, that is just an experience. It's not meant to be insulting at all. It's just, that was my experience.
Oh, it was well written.
Yeah.
I'm giving it well written. I would say, like, what I've read, it was well written, and I look forward to seeing more from the author. I hope that the next book catches me more.
I hope it does too. There you go. Okay, next review. Quest for Camlan, a LitRPG adventure, Camlan Realm, Book 1, written by A.T. Gilbert. Okay, this one is 266 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. This one goes, I'll read the author description. The game is life. Asher Duncan lives for the hours he spends in Toteria Online, his favorite MMORPG. His job and apartment are barely worth noticing, but he logs into the game and all that fades away. When Toteria Online announces the Camlan Challenge and a chance to win one of only 12 spots in their newest game, Asher is determined to beat them all, even if it means quitting his job to play. Camlan Realm is full of all the best parts of a fantasy game: goblins, mysterious loot, magic spells, and if it weren't for his constant obsession with the Camlan Challenge leaderboard, Asher could just play. But once logged in, Asher realizes that playing against both the game and the other 11 gamers might be more than he's ready for. He puts everything on the line just to be there. Can Asher compete against both the professional gamers and the game's own trials to win the Camlan Challenge and not lose it all? So there you go. This is a virtual reality game contest story that doesn't get particularly interesting, at least for me, or focused about halfway through the story. The game mechanics story feel undetailed and only half cared about sometimes. Combat is mostly mediocre. The story isn't bad once you get to the halfway point, but the ending twists, and there are a couple, they feel super forced. The things that the main character does are out of character, and they feel like they're only there to kind of get you to read another book, it's a choice. That's a choice. So I'm going to go into more details here, folks. They might be a tiny bit spoilery, but I think they're important for you to understand what the issues with the story are. I'm going to begin with the game mechanics in the story. The game mechanics are probably the most frustrating thing about this for me. Sometimes some things are consistent and well done. Others seem to be randomly implemented, and others feel like they were just cut out entirely because they were too big of a hassle to keep track of. Quests are one of the more consistent mechanics. The main character gets a notification with quest details and rewards every single time he gets a quest. Yay. However, who's giving the quest sometimes does feel random. Sometimes it's from an NPC. Other times it just seems to be from thin air. For example, early in the story, the main character wants to make a canoe to cross a river, or to a lake rather, and magically a quest is just generated for him to try woodcraft. It's never clear if it's the system reading his mind and giving him a quest, or if it's some personal AI watching him, or if it's the game designer. It's just, I think I should do this thing. Oh, look, here's a quest. Great. And I'm like, okay, that seems random. Crafting. What was that?
A little bit creepy.
Yeah, it is. Because like, is the game reading my mind? I'm like, that would be a cool thing if it was, but it's like, it's never really addressed and it's never followed up.
Would it be cool?
Yeah, I think it would. Yeah, I generally think that would be a cool mechanic because then there's like this subtle undertone in the story of like, is the game reading my mind and giving me what I want, or am I just imagining it? And so that there can be a really interesting like sub storyline there. But again, that's not what this is, unfortunately. And that's one of the things. Crafting also in the story feels like a box the authors felt they had to check when they were writing the story. And that happens a lot of these stories too. It amounts to the main character holding some sticks in one hand and waving his hand over them and magically transforming those sticks into a club, a staff, or a boat paddle. And that's it. And I'm like, I'm a guy who loves crafting. So I'm like, that was like, oh man, there could have been cool crafting. And that's what it was. I'm like, oh well.
It does sound like an MMO though.
What was that?
Sounds like every MMO though. Like you throw 4 sticks in your inventory, you wave your hand magically, or in this case, you press a button on your mouse and bam, you've got a club.
No. And it would have been cooler for me if there was like a UI they come up and he placed the sticks in the box and he pressed the button, because that would have made more traditional sense. But this is supposed to be set in the future where there's virtual reality and and supposed to be like physical. Like everything else he does in the story has to be done the hard way. Like if he wanted to swim across that lake, he'd have to jump in the water and swim. There's no auto button where he can says like auto swim. You know what I mean? Or to kill a monster, he has to physically stab the thing and cut it and whatever and move around. And so the expectations in the story are that, okay, realism is going to be part of the story. And in just this one aspect, it's like magic wand waving. And I'm like, okay, that's
wait. There was auto swim?
No. I wish if there had been, that would make more sense. I said if that would have been part of the core mechanics story, if there are a lot of automated systems, this would have made sense. Like the crafting would have made more sense, but that doesn't exist here. Most of the story is set upon realism. Like in a lot of LitRPGs in general, you usually have like a range of stuff between like, traditional MMOs we see now versus realism, right? And so there's a wide spectrum there. And this one fell more on the realism side. So the expectation is that crafting should be a little more realistic, at least in this particular sense, and it just wasn't. So it stood out as something that was just like, one of these things does not belong, and it's crafting.
Was there like a random player running around the town just jumping for no reason?
Nope. You don't get to the town. Okay, sorry, this is spoiler, folks. Until that 50% mark, which is when it gets kind of focused. And I'm going to get to that in a minute.
I just was trying to gauge the level of realism. Like, did they have random people just running around going all the time for no reason at all?
No. The story setup is basically that there are 12 characters who are getting early access to this expansion pack in this game. And so those 12 players are supposed to be competing for this big prize. The top level player with the most experience points gets a permanent position at this game company. So everyone's supposed to be like really professional gamers. Like they're really striving hard to level up. Which doesn't really make sense because they all just kind of scatter and run forward. And I'm like, that's not how you level up, folks. It's not a race. It's, but that's a separate point. But that's that's the level of professionals within these 4 characters. And for most of the story, the main character is just by himself until that 50% mark. And so he's not just jumping around random, because it really isn't that themed story. Like if it was, and again, this is technical for the audience, but in some LitRPG, again, there's a range of like, where in the future spectrum it is. Some authors said it like very much in the present, or they're informed by current MMO genres and tropes and things people do in current MMOs, and other authors projecting the future saying, oh, well, it's going to be more real. And so people aren't going to be able to just like randomly jump up in place and have it be a thing. In this case, it was again more towards the realism side. Okay, so crafting wasn't great. So I'm kind of basically sucked. I was disappointed by it. One of the mechanics that I felt was eliminated from the story because it was annoying to keep track of is essentially health pools and mana pools. And I wouldn't normally care because that's just an author's choice. It's just that the author makes it a point of showing that the main character loses health in the fight. So for example, it says, a light nip on my heels, on my ankles tells me that it means business, negative 12 health points. And when I read that, I was like, what does that mean? I'm like, is 12 health points a lot? I don't know, because you never told me how much health the main character had, or you never gave me like a reference point for what that 12 hit points means. So I don't know if is that 1% of his health? Is it 109%? Like, is he supposed to be dead? I don't know. You didn't tell me. And it's one of those things like when you start using numbers in an RPG, in a LitRPG, you should have reference points, because otherwise those numbers don't mean anything, and they kind of lose their value. Yes. Did you want to say that comment? Nope. Okay. Then we'll leave that there. But it's just one of those things, and it just bothers me as a numbers person. I'm like, I want my numbers to have meaning, and so if you choose to use them, give them actual meaning. And that's just that. Maybe that's me. I don't know. Other people probably don't care. But nowhere because there are character sheets in the story. There are character sheets with like stats, like strength, constitution, magic, and it's a really outstanding omission to me that there's no health points and there's no mana points in that character sheet, because it's just a little bit of math. It doesn't seem like it's that hard, at least for my brain. It's just one of the things that stuck out to me. There are a few well-described combat scenes in the story, but most of them are just poorly described. Most combat scenes are basically the main character swings his weapon and magically kills everything. And literally this is something that's written in the story. It says, I halt my paddling for a moment. I have enough momentum at least to continue floating slowly while in the correct direction, and arm myself with one of the 10 clubs I have stowed, plus 30 XP, plus 28 XP, plus 37 XP, a quick knock on the head, and all the eels fall away. And that's the combat scene. And I'm like, that's a choice. I'm not disputing the author's right to choose right that way. It's just that's not a particularly exciting combat scene. And I'm like, and that's probably what 80% of the combat is written that way. There are a couple scenes that are really well written, especially like the one at the very end. So I'm not saying all combat scenes are like that. It's just that for the most part, the combat wasn't that amazing. Now onto the story. The first 17% of the story begins with the main character, Asher, or Sir Asher in the game, winning a contest to get early access to a new expansion area of his favorite VR game. This section goes on a little too long, and while it does establish backstory for the main character, much of it feels like a waste since he never comes up again. So like he talks to his friends at the beginning, but you never see other friends again. There's like a big section about him signing paperwork. And I'm like, that seems unnecessary. Like there's only 5 or 6 pages of him signing stuff. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. By the 18% mark on the story, the main character is in the game competing against other winners of this contest to get the highest level and win even better prizes. There are some decent stakes set up here. All the contestants are told if they die in the game, they lose everything they've gained. All the levels, all the experience points, all the items that they lost. And so they lose all the loot and levels, and they go back to level 10, which is the starting level for this expansion section. It's not bad, but the risk is really mitigated by the half-hearted implementation of player versus player combat. Players can hurt each other, but they can't actually kill each other, which seems like a weird middle ground to me. Like either you're going to have full player versus player action where they can kill each other and set each other back, which is great for a contest. Or you're not going to have player versus player at all, so it's just every man for himself competing against the environment. But like this is definitely something weird in the middle. So I'm like, pick one or the other, please. Unfortunately, even from this early point in the game mechanics feel unfinished and undetailed, and the story doesn't become particularly interesting or focused until the 48% mark of the story, when the main character reaches what seems like the only village in the entire game, which is also a weird thing to me, because everybody in the story ends up there. I'm like, Charles Dean in the chat room asks, says, have you ever killed somebody in an MMO? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of player versus player combat, but I have. I played several games like where PvP is a thing, and it's handled very. What was that?
What was the MMO?
World of Warcraft. Also, God, what's it called? There was one. It was just basically PV all the time. It was like Ruin something.
RuneScape?
It might have been RuneScape. I think so. That had PvP.
Was it like really terribly drawn, like super old? Looked like it might have been like the original MMO of all time.
Yeah, it was. The graphics weren't amazing, but the game mechanics were kind of cool because your class was based on like the runes you get, right? If I'm thinking of it correctly. But
I never played RuneScape. I just know like EverQuest and RuneScape came before the MMOs I played because I played a lot of text-based games during that era.
Yeah, and I might be thinking of a different game, but like I said, I played PvP before. It's not my favorite thing. It's not the mechanic I love the most in games. I find it annoying, mostly because I'm usually on the bad end of that. I'm usually getting ganked. That's just
a personal PvP fight a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, but like if you're gonna have it full on. Like make it interesting. And it's just one of those things. This particular choice seemed weird because it was very much like the halfway point between like they can hurt each other, but they can't kill each other. And
I miss games that had consequence, but it actually makes sense because the more games you see that come out with PvP friendliness, like World of Warcraft is a great example of where they thought, hey, let's add PvP, but let's make it as meaningless as possible. Where if you kill somebody, you get like you used to get like a little honor credit. I don't remember what you get now, but you used to get like a little honor if you killed somebody from the other faction.
Like reputation.
Yeah, and those games do well because the average person would sit down and they don't want to deal with the stress of having somebody like wreck their day.
Yeah, and that's what PvP does for some people.
The games like Dark Ages of Camelot had really good PvP, and Shadowbane, where you could literally kill an entire city. So the only cities that existed outside of the noob zones were player cities, and an entire server could be set back by one fight. Yeah, we actually had a point where there was only one guy who could train a barbarian up to level 60, and that barbarian city got completely wiped off the map. So all the barbarians could only train up to level 40 for weeks because of this.
Right, until like you give the training back up
because nobody wanted to deal with that stress.
Yeah, or some group of people only want to. Like the general populace generally doesn't. They're not that invested in like spending hundreds of hours like building a resource to build your city and to implement it. Crafters and trainers and buildings and whatever. I played that particular game as well. And I remember just dying repeatedly as a rogue because no matter where I sneaked, everybody thought I was trying to... what was that? Yeah, I played Shadowbane. I played as a thief for a little while.
I might have made money off you.
You might have. I remember playing.
I may or may not have. I will not admit to this, but I may or may not have PK'd a lot of people, taken their gold and sold it on eBay.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. Like you either like player versus player games or you don't. And it's one or the other. But like I said, in this one, it didn't really work out that well. The story does get interesting about the 50% mark when there's actually more interaction between the character and other characters, which is when they get to the village, and a lot of the quests start feeling like they're focused for once. And that's part of what this story lacked for the first half of it. It was like focus. Like there are quests the main character goes on, but they feel rather random. Like they kind of tap towards the end. But it's not until like he gets to that city where everything he does is meant to lead him towards a particular quest goal. And there's like an overarching quest series.
So the crafting doesn't make sense.
Nope.
The PvP has no consequence, and none of the quests are worth a damn. So it's basically like an actual MMO experience.
Sort of, except that somebody wrote this one. And so part of the experience of like LitRPG is that, to me at least, is that you kind of create your own idealistic game. You know what I mean? Like that's what a lot of authors do. Like they work out the mechanics so everything works a little bit better in like their version of the game, and this wasn't one of it. And again, the last little bit of detail I had on the story was the fact that the end of the story was just kind of dumb to me. Like it did not make sense. Like the main character does some stuff that is completely out of character for the entire previous set of the book. Like he betrays some people, and that's not in character for him. And then there's like a secondary twist on top of that that's just like, oh, find out the rest of the story in book 2. And that's what it felt like it was there for. And I'm like, I'm kind of annoyed by it because it feels like, oh, for half a second, like, oh, the main, I'm not like, I don't want to spoil this, but it feels like there's a definite consequence to the main character. And then it's immediately erased. And I'm like, and then it's like, read the rest in book 2. And I'm like, that always annoys me. Overall, again, it's not a bad story. The writing is fine. It's just that I didn't get the entertainment. It didn't become even halfway entertaining for me until like already halfway through it. The half-hearted implementation of the game mechanics definitely lessened my enjoyment of the story. Like the ones that are there, the ones that are consistent, I'm really okay with. It's just that it felt like they didn't want to go through the effort of doing the full RPG stuff. And they started some and they didn't finish it. And sometimes they were there and sometimes I'm like, it bothers me as like a game mechanic numbers guy. Other people can probably ignore it. I couldn't. But it's not a bad story again. It gets a score of 6 out of 10 for me. Quest for Camlan, a little bit of adventure. Camlan around book 1, score 6 out of 10. Wow, a lot of stuff. This is so much more intense when I'm talking to somebody.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I'm going to hit you with stuff randomly.
No, that's fine. This is like I said, it's a different.
I still have to know what server on Shadowbane. Like, I am worried about like if I was actually killed you, maybe.
You might have. I don't remember.
Were you on the Fear server?
I really don't remember. I think I blocked out most of those painful memories just to protect myself.
Well, we had the one thing I did like about that game is at one point we had 3,280 something people in a fight. And we got on the front page of the Shadowbane News. And it was just like this massive fight. It was fun because when it started, it was a real way to see who had a computer that could handle anything and who didn't.
Yeah.
Because I would go through and I had this giant Minotaur barbarian guy and I would just walk through and start cleaving people in half who were just standing still because their computers clearly couldn't handle this number of people. And I was like, this is how an MMO should be. Like, I want to see thousands of people kill each other, not like 30 people play like dodgeball or hut ball.
No, I think that happens in some, I want to say it happens in one of the Russian stories where that actually occurs. Like some people's characters start freezing and slowing down and they're just murdered mercilessly, like in this giant server battle of like realm versus realm. I can't remember which story it is, but
yeah, when it gets so big that the servers can't handle it, yeah, that's a good sign.
Yeah,
I know that people will say that's a bad sign, but that means you are testing the limits of how close you can get to an actual siege battle when you've got hundreds of trebs firing, thousands of people. That's a fun fight.
Yeah, I'm always impressed by.
And I haven't seen that since.
Yeah, I'm always impressed by any server who can handle all those people at once. So I'm like, hey, but these are the experiences that we have as MMO players, as RPG players, communally. And if I would have seen something like that in like novels, it's something that's exciting because like, oh, I can relate to that, and you don't see that a lot.
Imagine the sickness.
What was that?
Like, imagine a VR MMO and you start rubber banding.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
Oh my God. That would be like, I feel like I would throw up in whatever pod I was in. Like, it would just be all over the place. I'd be like, it would just be awful.
No. And again, those are opportunities. All those little things are just story opportunities to me. Those experiences are communal between every MMO player who's played anything in the last like 10, 15 years.
It happened in Tick Book 1, by the way. We put that in there.
Yeah. So there you go. See, folks, he knows what he's talking about. He's used these experiences himself. Okay. I have to keep going. Next review, The Drachma Killer's Last Word, Unigaea, Book 2, written by Harmon Cooper. Okay. This one is 298 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Full disclosure, the author sent me an earlier copy for review. I purchased it when it was released. I didn't actually read it until it was already out. I got backlogged. But he did send me one, so that is worth full disclosure. If you love book 1 in this series, you might like book 2. It has the same sex jokes. There's a load of action and adventure. Unfortunately for me, I feel like you could probably skip the entire thing. There's a loss of urgency that came at the end of book 1. And there's no resolution of any of the plot points that are established in this. What I mean by that is at the end of book 1, there's a huge reveal. And if you haven't read book 1, why you listening to review for book 2, I don't know. But at the end of book 1, there's this big reveal that there's a huge world-shaking threat that threatens the entire world, or this game world anyways, called the Source Code Bomb. And it's very urgent that the main character and his friends go deal with it as soon as possible. There's urgency, right? And so you think book 2 is going to open up with similar urgency, right? Instead, it opens up with the main character and his friends going on a leisurely raft trip towards a cabin to meet up with a team member. Like they're literally Huck Finning it, and they're like in a raft, cruising around, chit-chatting, and like, where'd that urgency go? And that's thematic of most of this story. There's kind of a magic wave wand at the beginning of the story that kind of annoyed me as well, because the main character is gifted with like 5 new levels and several powers. And like, it makes sense because they play a part of the story later on. But like at the beginning, that always annoys me because that character didn't earn that. It literally, an AI god comes down and goes, magic, magic. And he gets 5 levels and new abilities. I'm like, yay, that doesn't make sense. But it's in the story. From there, most of the story is kind of this meandering journey towards the Drachma killers in an effort to destroy them, like the main character said he would from book 1. Like, book 1 is definitely a revenge story. That's what it's set up to be as. Like, the main character is on this revenge journey. He got a new character, and he set it up as a player killer, as a player versus player killer. And his big thing in book 1 is, I'm going to kill these guys who destroyed my city and all the people that I, had in that city. And it's emphasized in this story that that's what's supposed to happen. Like, he's like, I'm going to forego this big world shaking quest so that I can get my revenge. And it's not resolved. Like, it's literally set up through the entire book that's what he wants to do. He gets there and it doesn't end. Like, story just kind of ends before it actually happens. Like, there's no actual resolution of that plot point. And it was super frustrating for me. So, I mean, that was the thing for me. The adventures are still very funny. They're very actiony. But they kind of felt like filler compared to book 1 because book 1 had a definite focus. The focus was revenge. It felt like Lethal Weapon, RPG version, if you can think of it that way. And there are a couple points in the story that are very much like that, but it's a tiny bit, unfortunately. And I really had a hard time making an emotional investment in book 1. It didn't speak to me. Like, the revenge aspect didn't make sense to me from the character's point of view. So I had a hard time connecting to the characters in book 1. And it was even more difficult in book 2. Like, the only character from book 1 that I liked was Wolf, which is his pet giant wolf, who's a very lovable dog character, right? And this is spoilery. He died. Like, I mean, that's what happens, folks. If you're not listening to audio version, video version, that's what happens. And it's like, that character just, it bothered me what happens at the end of book 2 to that character. And so overall, it's a fine action adventure story. It is. There's plenty of jokes. It's very funny in the same way that book 1 was funny. But the novel just meandered. And I generally feel like you can skip book 2 and not miss anything. You can go from book 1 into book 3, who's coming up. I think it's supposed to come out in like December sometime. And you probably won't miss much of the plot. So for me, wasn't a home run. Not horrible. A lot of people like this book and they like the series. I'm just not a huge fan, unfortunately. And it's not a bad book. It gets a score of 6 out of 10 for me. It's just never got good for me. So the Drachma Killer's Last War of Unigaea, book 2, gets a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Any comments from the Charles? Nope.
I haven't read this one. I'm going to step away.
It's okay.
I got to be honest, I haven't even heard of the first one.
Yeah. Harmon Cooper has several series. He has, the Feedback Loop series. He has the Fantasy Online, which is probably the more popular one. And he has this one, which is the Last War of Unigaea series. So there you go.
If you had to recommend him over like a specific book I like, would you pick it? Like on this list?
Restate your question for me. I'm gonna make sure I understand it.
If you had to recommend the series over like would you say it's as good the first one? Because you said the first one had these issues addressed. Would you say it's as good as like, say, Greystone's?
No, definitely not. I mean, that's why I have the review scores. Book 1 got a 6 out of 10 for me. Book 2 gets a 6 out of 10 for the Last War of Unigaea. I never really liked, I'm not saying I didn't like it. It never really landed with me. Like a lot of other people enjoy it. Like there are aspects of this series that I like. The humor is really, it's funny. There's a lot of sex jokes, even if they don't always seem like they come from anywhere normal. But the humor is very funny in this series. Good action in this entire series, great. It's just that the plot just feels weird in book 2. In book 1, there's at least a focus. Even if I didn't agree with the focus, even if I didn't think it made sense from the character's point of view, there was still at least that consistency of it. Like the main character's out for revenge. He's going to do what he needs to do it, right? And that just doesn't exist here. It's just kind of lost in book 2. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. But I personally not a huge fan of this particular series. Like it's not bad. It's just that's why it's a 6 instead of a 7. 7 is just definitely, I recommend it. Go read it. 6 is like, this may not be for me, but other people may enjoy it. It's not badly written though. And that's just what this series is for the most part. I'm always hoping I read a new book like this, because I've continued reading this. I hope it gets better. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it don't. But definitely Greystone Chronicles gets a 7. So that kind of tells you where the difference is, at least for me. Cool.
Yeah, no. I mean,
Okay, I know.
I'm biased on one of them.
No, that's fine. I get it. That's cool. Like I said, Harmon Cooper's other series, Fantasy Online, definitely lands better for me. I won't speak about the feedback loop though. Okay. Next one, World Keeper: The Dawn of an Era, written by Justin Miller. This one is 286 pages, $3.99. It is not available, not on Kindle Unlimited. And this is Justin Miller does this. He doesn't put many of his stories on Kindle Unlimited. It's a choice. I think he has a lot of it online as well, so that may be part of it. The author's description: join Dale as he continues to grow as a keeper. With the experience slowly piling up around him, how will he deal with the changes to come? Is he ready for all that awaits him? His world has stepped out of its early stages, moving on to bigger and better things, while Dale and his pantheon watch from above. See how his decisions impact the story, the course of history, and what as he shapes the world with the help of those around him. Which tells you nothing about that story. Like, it really doesn't. And I have to tell you, folks, this is a good book. I really do like it. This entire World Keeper series is probably underrated. And that's mostly because the cover art is not amazing. The author recycles his cover art every single book in the series, so it's hard to tell that it's a new book. And his Amazon descriptions aren't the best, but it really is a truly good series, especially game mechanic wise. It's unique, and I really like it. It is again 286 pages, $3.90, and this is the second book in the series. Now, just to give you a quick overview of what this novel is about, this story is told from the perspective of the main character, who's the god of this universe. It's sort of like one of those god games like Black and White, told in a story form. The main character is literally above the whole earth. And he has these resource points that he can use to create races and influence their development in the world. There are restrictions, like he can't like just poke somebody and like murder them necessarily, but he can like create an avatar to go down the road temporarily. Although he is vulnerable and he can die while he's there. And if he dies, that's it for the universe. So there's always a risk involved in there. But he also has a bunch of other tools to influence the societies that he's built, including creating other gods to manage like particular races. Like he created a halfling race and he created a halfling god to kind of manage it a little bit. And so there's a lot of cool details like that. So if you're into those kind of god games, this might be the kind of game that you like. If you like resource management stuff, there's definitely all that in here. There's a lot of great world building as well. So you may enjoy that or not. It's a fun story that people who love those kind of games are going to enjoy. If you like crafting, research management, magic, manipulation from gods, good world building, and the ability to see how those kind of decisions and influences will shape a community and culture over the course of like hundreds of years potentially, this is it. This is a good one for you. Easy review, gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. That's World Keeper: The Dawn of an Era, 7 out of 10. So there you go. I'm like, did you fall asleep? No? Okay. I thought I saw you close your eyes and fall asleep. Okay. I was curious.
I close my eyes sometimes because I have to admit I've been blind most of my life.
Okay.
So eyesight is not something I use a lot when I'm thinking. And I know it messes even with my wife sometimes because she'll be like, Charles, are you sleeping? It's like, no, I just don't like using my eyes, especially when it sometimes gives me a headache.
Okay. That's perfectly fine. I know that my face does give people headaches, so that's understandable. Okay.
Yeah. It's the glare off the face. Like I can see that you have too many charisma points and you need to tone that stat down. Like just reduce it some.
There you go. So invest in intelligence. Got it. Okay. Next story. This one's gonna be
switch it over to strength, maybe. You know.
I never like strength builds. I'm always more of a caster guy. So intelligence,
really?
wisdom.
I love casters too, but I always play bards and stuff like that.
I'm okay
because you don't need stats. Like a lot of their skills are all like DC save 15, and so you can just totally mess with somebody and then just be like, you put the onus on the GM. Be like, see if you can roll away from this, versus like you rolling out like a 4 and then seeing if you can get away with it. I mean, I don't know.
Oh,
for me, that's my favorite part about casters.
Oh, see, there you go. We have things in common. I'm not a big fan of bards, but I see how they've been played very cool. I can never just play them that well, so that's probably why.
The minor illusion and the bardic inspiration, and my favorite part is the vicious laughter, where you can make fun of somebody and it's totally allowed. And not only is it like allowed, like you can come up with the most horrendous insult possible, And then people will be like, well, it's just his spell.
Oh, there you go. Some great role-playing opportunities. Okay, next review, though, we're going to go into Under the Flag, Epic LitRPG Adventure Fayroll Book 6, written by A. Vasiliev, who I'm pretty think I've interviewed him. I can't remember. Here we go. Let's see. There's such a long description. I'm going to skip it. It is 376 pages. It is $6.95. Kind of expensive. It is also not on Kindle Unlimited. So it's kind of 20 cents per page, and it's not a cheap page. It's like $7 for a novel, an ebook. And I get that the author, there are translation costs here. I'm like, it's hard for me to justify that for people. If you're a fan of the series, this is probably one of the better ones in the recent series in this. I've kind of been getting bored with it, to be honest. Not that it's badly written or anything. It's just like, they kind of lost my interest. And this one kind of picked up again, just because of how it's written and how it kind of takes, it's an interesting, I'll get into it, but I liked it. Okay, the first 9% of the story ties up the witch quest from book 5, so it's decent hype. And as soon as the main character finds himself, he gets the item, he's transported to a new place, an island. I'm not going to say the word. I'm probably not going to say it right. You know me. A part of the game that is still in beta testing. And the game admins are letting the main character in because he has the quest that may change the fate of Fayroll, which is the game world. The rules are different here. To keep his progress, the main character will actually have to find save points within the world, within the section to save at. He can't use the in-game message system. He can't use the auction house in the game. And anything outside of this section is closed off to him. So he's literally on his own. He's playing a single-player campaign inside of an MMO. So I'm like, that's a very interesting way to change your storyline. It really is a single player. Yeah, it is. It comes down to being a single player campaign in an MMO because he's in this new test area and there are no other players. So it's an interesting way to divert the story. I kind of think of it as like an interesting side quest or a side journey, except that it does relate to the main storyline. And so he's stuck in this area until he completes his quest. So even if it takes him years and years, he's not getting out, hypothetically. So I'm like, good stakes, good change in game mechanics, and honestly a welcome change from the regular storyline. The novel did, again, a great job of kind of resetting the in-game storyline, at least temporarily. It eliminates all the guild drama from the other books, all the side quests. It's a little more focused, and it was a nice break from, again, the main series. There are no cliffhangers, so that's always good. Just action, adventure on the high seas, pirate style. I mean, it's on the cover. It's a pirate kind of sea story novel. The real life storyline in the novel it's a little bit dry. I'll admit it's not very long, thankfully, percentage wise of the story. But when you get to the chapter called The Second Conversation, the real life storyline gets really interesting for a little while. You may have to look up some religious references when you read it, but it definitely.
Which religion?
I'm going to say Judeo-Christian, but it could, it's basically good and evil. That's kind of it. But there are definitely some religious references that might.
Are we talking like Catholic or Lutheran? I
don't know, because it's from Russia. And so some of the references are lost on me. So I'm like, some of them.
I used to go to a Russian Orthodox church, so hopefully it'll be right up my alley.
It definitely could be, but there's definitely that influence of like good and evil. And it kind of changes the real life view of this storyline and what the game means a little bit. And I'm sure they're going to revisit that in book 7. But I thought just like this one little section of the world story, I'm like, oh, that's definitely new. And I'm like, some people might like it. Some people might not. I personally thought I was like, oh, that's different at least. So I'm like, okay. But there are also there are some cultural issues. And you're going to always get this when you get translations from other countries, whether it's China or Korea or Japan or in this case, Russia. Some things don't translate well. For example, what's a pedophile address? I don't know, but that's a phrase they use in this novel in the real life section. I'm like, okay, I'm Googling
this. This is weird. A what?
Yeah, a pedophile address. I'm like, okay, sometimes they'll do references like for specific people or events in Russia, and they'll give you a footnote for it in the back, right? This wasn't one of them. And this happens sometimes in this series in particular.
I'm afraid that Google is going to report me for this search.
Oh, yeah. I looked it up and I couldn't find it either. I'm like, Russian pedophile address? Is that a thing?
I feel like just searching this, like I'm going to have like some guy knock on my door and be like, Mr. Dean, we'd like to talk to you about your pedophile address issue.
Yeah.
I feel like, God dang it.
Yeah, and there are a couple other things along those lines that I'm like, okay, that's probably cultural, not a big deal. That one just stood out as the most funny, interesting.
I got a Russian friend. I'll ask him tonight to see if it's like a common phrase, maybe.
It could be, or it could just be like a weird translation, because that happens too. Like some Russian phrase is translated verbatim, and it doesn't have the same meaning in English. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that happens. I wonder if
sometimes. I could find the original Russian phrase and ask.
You could. It's like I said, it's in the chapter that says. Well, it's not the second conversation, but there's definitely like a few chapters.
I'm not going to look at the sixth book yet. I kind of stopped at 4 because of a specific plot issue that I was going to get around to starting 5 soon.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure of anything particular because I'm on book 6. So I'm like, that was a couple books ago. I don't always remember.
Okay. Yeah. No, there was a small issue and I was like, you know what? I'll just stall it out and I'll wait a few books and then pick it back up and then see how it rolls. Yeah,
this is definitely like if you just wanted to read this on its own, you're not going to lose anything. Like you could read this as an independent novel, and you would probably be okay because it most of this is just set in pirate. Yeah, like
that was happening before because I don't know if this is a common thing, but I feel like and I'm totally guilty of this myself. I worry that when I'm reading a story, there's going to be something unresolved, and it's going to leave me with like a bitter taste.
Oh.
And I'm going to have to read the 5th book and I'm going to have to read the 6th book. I'm going to have to read the 7th book just to get rid of this bitter taste. And if it never goes away, then I'm just going to be done with the author.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying.
There's a certain shaman book that I like a lot, but I'm worried about that bitter taste because, when you finish a book, you want to feel good. And, even if you really love the story, if it leaves that taste in your mouth, you're like, do I want to read the next one and torture myself again? Like, how much of a masochist am I?
No, and some I get that. But some of these books are very plot masochism, I guess you can call it. That's definitely not the case in this particular story. Like I said, it's an enclosed storyline. Like the entire thing, the entire quest plotline
fills itself up.
It's completely encapsulated from beginning to end.
That is wonderful.
Like he literally can't leave this area until he finishes this quest, and I don't think he's ever coming back to it, like to this section. So it almost feels like a side story, except that it relates to like the larger plot lines. So overall, I had a good time with it. I've been giving them like 6 out of 7s recently, just because I'm like, okay, there's a lot of like guild stuff and a lot of like espionage and I'm like that's not my thing. And the action adventure stuff hasn't directly related to the plots recently until like the very end. In a lot of these stories, and this one was just like such a fresh breath of like coherency and like completely like resolved by the end of the story. It's like, okay, that's good. Like the real life storyline is not resolved, but that doesn't have to be. But like the game stuff is all totally encapsulated in one bit. So I'm like, that's good. For me, I got a score 7 out of 10. Again, that's Under the Black Flag, Fayroll book 6. Good score. 7 out of 10 for me.
Is it a piracy book?
Yeah, it's definitely pirate themed. It's not pirated. It's a pirate themed book where he goes in the high seas.
Yeah, you said Black Flag because that has a few things. Like it could be like that place in Africa. It could be like a specific Union flag. Like there's a bunch of random things that Black Flag means. But 9 out of 10 times it's pirates.
Yeah, it's definitely like you look at the cover, like, oh, pirates. And that's what it is. It's a pirate theme, like water, like sea battle stuff, conquering little islands. Yeah, that's what it is. And but like I said, totally.
It's actually even a town.
What was that?
There's actually a gold mining town named Black Flag.
Did not know that. You always get the greatest tips from Charles, folks.
I'm sorry. It's so I actually have a friend from there, and it's Australia. And there's a little town named Black Flag, and he loves to make jokes about it. So when I told him, hey, you should go watch Black Flag because they had like this weird pirate series on a Showtime, I think it was. He's like, I'm from there. I'm never going to watch it. I'm like, what? Showtime show? He's like, no, they're Black Flag. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, that's what that series is based on, that location and like piracy?
No. Black Flag is based on like the actual pirates. There's just a place, and it's like it's pretty much abandoned now. Like you're not going to find a person there. It's just like there's a place called Black Flag.
Okay, perfect. So lots of interesting information. Thank you. Okay, next review, we're going to move on to Eden's Gate, The Sands, a LitRPG adventure by Edward Brody. There we go. It's going to be 366 pages, $4.98, available on Kindle Unlimited. This one is not a long review either. Again, it's the 3rd book in the series, so by now you either like this series or you don't. For me, this was a good story. This was also kind of a side adventure as well. This is the adventure of Gunnar, the main character, in a new land. After reminding the reader about the various characters in the story, the author whisks away the main character to a faraway land where he'll learn about a new threat to the peace of his new home. He stays there for most of the story. He fights new creatures, gains new magic items, infiltrates a new evil group to learn of their evil plans, and all the action adventure you've come to love and enjoy from the series is definitely here, folks. While I enjoyed the side trip to this new land, the events that force the main character there are forced. That's it. It's this story is very forced as far as like the premise of getting him there. I rolled my eyes several times while reading. It's like, okay, I see where this is going and why he got there. And like, it is what it is. The author might as well have had him fall down a rabbit hole or get pushed through a mysterious portal. That would have been just as legitimate and, but it's a choice. But despite the way the main character gets there, the new exotic location opens up some nice, interesting storytelling opportunities. So there is that. This isn't my favorite novel in the series, but it's still entertaining. There are also a noticeable there's more grammar issues here, and it's mostly tense issues, like present and past tense in the same sentence, a lot in this particular story. And I was really surprised because most of the previous novels had really good editing, and this was noted by other reviewers as well. But overall, good read. Gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. That's Eden's Gate, The Sands, a LitRPG adventure, 7 out of 10. So comments from the audience?
I don't know about the audience, but for me, I cannot stand it when the tenses switch. That's it. That's a deal breaker for me. I won't continue reading because it just gets too confusing because I'm like, when is this happening? And I can excuse I can excuse ambiguity in a lot of things, but if I don't know how a sentence is supposed to work with another sentence, it just drives me insane. And that could be because despite how awful my writing is, I actually did major in English and I had to grade a lot of papers when I was a teacher. And so the most annoying thing would just be like, oh, this sentence looks like it should match. Like if you put the sentence on its own, it's fine. And then you put this sentence on its own, it's fine. And then you put this sentence on its own, it's fine. But now when you put them all three in one paragraph, I want to stab the author. Tenses are my biggest issue. So yeah. I mean, when I write, they're my biggest issue as well. Like reviewers and like my editor, who I point out that me as well, because I write in present tense, but sometimes I'll slip into past tense occasionally, and it's just a thing, which is why my eyes notice it in this novel, because I'm like, oh, I do that too. It's just that they got through here, and it was quite a few. So I'm like, okay, it is what it is. At some point, my brain just stopped noticing and just started to make, oh, this is the story. We're going to ignore that to continue on. Do make sure to check that before sending me advanced copies. I still want the free books. Like I'm cheap. Hook me up, but don't. Make sure to check that first. Yeah, that happens. Like I said, it's just a thing that happens occasionally with writing. So, and this is just one of those things. Like, because I know some people can't ignore it. I can. It's not my brain. Paragraphs of yours. I think I snapshotted and sent to you that just drove me insane, and I wanted to stab something at that time. They could be. I think I still have it on the log somewhere. I don't know that you sent me the messages because just full disclosure, Charles has beta read for my latest novel, which is called Project Alpha, which is coming out when I get my cover art, whenever that comes in. So he's referring to the beta rating that he's done for me in that particular story. Okay. Any more comments? Nope. Okay. On to the next story. I'm looking for the sentences I sent you that were just so horrid. I had to stop and be like, oh my God. There was only 2 paragraphs in an entire book, though. Relatively not bad, I guess. Okay. I think I've got at least 30 for myself. Like, my books are much worse, so. Thank you. That's comforting. Okay, next review, it's going to be Wounded Legion, a mech LitRPG novel, Armored Souls Book 2, written by Xavier P. Hunter. This is one of the very few mech LitRPGs that are out there. And this one, unfortunately, got less RPG for me. I'll read you it's going to be 325 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. I will, I'm not going to read you the author description. It's kind of long and it's not needed. Book 2 in the series introduces a larger game world for Armored Souls. The team creates their own faction. Wounded Legion recruits new members, conquers planets for resources, and builds their own bases. If you like book 1, there's more mech fighting here. That's probably the biggest point for it. There's also a bit of crafting, upgrading
player versus player combat. Unfortunately, there are fewer RPG mechanics, and honestly, book 1 was rather light on that as well. Most of this particular story is based on like mech warriors, I believe, and in those particular games, there are RPG mechanics, but they're not like super heavy. It's not meant to be like an RPG game. It's a mech fighting game. There just happen to be numbers involved, so there are RPG mechanics, which is unfortunate because in this game, again, they're just less. It's a bigger story with a bigger scope, so that tends to happen with novels. You kind of have to choose where you're going to spend your writing time on mechanics or like larger scope stories, and that's just a choice author made. It's still LitRPG to me, but barely. And I actually slightly disappointed, but overall, really actiony. And again, if you liked the action mech stuff from book 1, you'll probably like this one too. It's just that I was slightly disappointed by the fewer RPG mechanics. So for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. That's Wounded Legion, a mech LitRPG, Armored Souls book 2, 6 out of 10. So there you go. Comments from the audience? No? Okay, there you go. See?
I never got into mech stuff. I know a lot of people are into it, but for me, everybody says fantasy is unbelievable, but I like fantasy because at least I can imagine it happening, where when it comes to mech, there's no world I can imagine where an AI system wouldn't be better at handling a combat machine than I would be. Like, I have slow reaction speeds. I'm an old man. So there's no point where somebody be like, hey, you need to go pilot that mech. But, maybe I'll get stuck in like a sword fight if I had gotten thrown into like some random fantasy world. So it's a break of realism too much for me to like read the stuff. So yeah.
I think it's also, they're just divergent concepts. Like a lot of mech stories were written in an age where artificial intelligence wasn't as possible, so they're just, so I get why they're there.
Popular before we knew what artificial intelligence was. And nowadays we have the Dota players were all beaten by that like one AI system that took 2 weeks to like evolve.
Yeah.
Which it's a weird thing thinking that an AI evolves, but the open mind system works. It's really cool.
No, yeah. Like I said, AI is kind of the more popular trend. There are fewer mech stories. Like I said, this is why this is one of the few ones you have in the LitRPG genre. There are also fewer mech games. There's probably more mech anime, but they're basically fantasy stories. So that's a thing. That's a separate thing. Like I said, this one is, I always give the author credit for trying to do something new. And in book 1, there were just more RPG mechanics, and there are less here. So, but like I said, the same mech action. If you're into mech action, this series is probably going to hopefully satisfy you. Okay, last review onto the Greystone Chronicles, book 2, The Dire Lands by Dave Wilmarth. Now, full disclosure, Charles is friends with Dave Wilmarth, so take his comments with a grain of salt. They're friends. I am a neutral reader. Well, kind of neutral. Dave seems like a nice guy for the few times that I've chatted with him online. I will, go with, the Amazon, I list this at about 600 pages. I don't know if that's going to be adjusted later or not. It may or may not be correct. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description, folks. Jupiter Tech's headquarters, Olympus, has been attacked. Lives have been lost in the real world. Alexander and his friends must now thwart the servants of the Dark One both in and out of the game. With a few new allies, the Greystone Guild moves out of the noob zone to take on the challenges presented by the ruins of the Dire Keep and its inhabitants. They must conquer, rebuild, and defend the Dire Lands against attacking forces. The players, and Fimble, must now overcome tougher dungeons and more dangerous foes, even betrayal by one of their own. Okay. First off, kudos to the author for getting these novels out very quickly. Book 1 came out a month ago. Book 2 is already out. I believe the author plans to put...
Whoa. I have inside knowledge about this. He had apparently nearly finished the second book when he was publishing the first one. Because when I saw that the second book came out, I was like, Dave, what the hell, man? You are making me look bad. My editor's calling me up and asking me why I can't do the same thing. And how come I can't have more books out? And you're sitting here putting 2 books out, and Dave was like, "No, I've already finished the first, or I'd already started to work on the second one by the time I'd finished the first one, and by the time he was publishing it, he was already getting progress in. So don't feel bad, other authors."
No, but he also has book 3 coming out, I believe, in January.
He did a lot of like ahead of time work. I'm just saying that. Like, I'm not going to say like he's a miracle with the pen, but I have to like slow down on that roll because I don't want to get called up by my editor again and have him be like, "How come you can't write this fast?" And I'll be like, "Well, because StarCraft 2 and other books exist, and I have to read and I have to play."
So your comment to Dave is like, "Stop ruining this for the rest of us. Slow down."
Yeah, slow down, man. Like, this is not cool. Like, it's what was that series, The Builder or something, where they came out with like a book every month, and you were like, "What? 2 books in 1 month? That's not right. You got to slow down."
I hear what you're saying. I'm good for you, Dave. I have a different opinion. I'm like, you can do it. I can't. I talked to Dave recently online. He's like, "No, I just don't sleep." So that's his secret.
I don't get how he does it, because he's talking on Facebook all the time, and like I'm chatting with him, and then I'm like, bam, another book comes out, and I'm like, Dave, you're killing me, man. Like, comment.
No, there are a couple of writers who I know who write like super fast. Like Michael Chatfield comes out with a book a month. Michael Scott Earl will come out with like couple books a month sometimes, like in different series. And like those are some dedicated writers, I should say. Like they put in the hours, and they have a system in place where it allows editing to go on at the same time as writing. I'm like, cool for you guys. I can't.
The
I'm not that good.
Two week thing you were talking about last time.
Yeah, and that's what for Michael Chatfield, anyways. Going back to topic of the actual review, we'll get back to that. I'm going to review my review, and Charles is going to chime in for this one because he's actually read this particular novel, so he's an informed reader here. So we'll see what he has to say.
But I have to point out, the only thing I'm going to do is offer a few comments, because I think the correct term for where I'm from is I have to bust his balls a little bit. I have a few things I would like to say about it, but at the same time, it was a great novel, and I cannot. I can't say too much about it, or else he'll kill me. I think it'll happen.
So there you go, folks. So just keep that in mind when Charles makes his comments. Okay, where was I? Okay, there's a really nice summary at the beginning of book 1. At the beginning of book 2, it tells you about the main characters, what happened recently in book 1. But I really would recommend you read book 1. This isn't the kind of novel where you can just kind of jump in and understand everything. There are way too many characters, and there's even more characters introduced in the novel that confuse things, if you haven't read book 1 at least. The first 7% of the novel is a recap of book 1, reminding who everybody is, introducing new interesting characters. From the 7 to 14% of the mark of the story, it's really a nice action adventure story. That's pretty straightforward. The main group of characters are clearing out Dire Keep, and the Greystone Guild is taking possession of it. This is not spoilery. It's in the author's description. However, the next 50% of the novel is basically kingdom and town building, with the main character and his guild crafting, dungeon diving, or rather breaks in the kingdom building for crafting, dungeon diving, attacks from other players, serving the dark one, character development, betrayals, and love. But those things they're not as much of them as there is kingdom building. Most of the story is kingdom building and town building. So if you're not into that stuff, this may not be the novel for you, but there is still action adventure stuff. Like I said, over 50% of the novel, which at 600 pages is like 300 pages, I guess, is literally devoted to the building of Dire Keep, the upgrades. And this is really well done, in my opinion. It's well written. It's super duper detailed. There's text about recruiting new citizens for farming, crafting, fighting, planning of structures, building those structures, figuring out the game systems used to interface and upgrade the keep, planning defenses, planning for food and water needs for the citizens, and a ton of other more details. And so again, if you're a fan of that, this is for you, man. This is definitely the book for you. If you're not, again, there's still action and adventure. There's at least a good 20% of the novel within the section that is just fighting various players who attack the keep, dungeon diving, and there's a good variety of monsters and opponents here. So there is that still. Now we're going to get into the few things I thought could have been.
I'd like to have seen the main character beat up more in that fighting.
Sorry, can you repeat that for me?
I would like to have seen the main character hurt a little bit more.
Yes, that's part of what I talked about, the things that I thought could have been done better, but I agree with you. The main character and even the other characters, they seemed a little overpowered, and we'll talk about why in a second. The few things that I could have thought had been done better in the novel are, 1, the main character and the Greystone Guild are getting a little overpowered, especially compared to book 1. 2, the love interest in the story seems off. It seems.
Are you reading my list, man?
I'm reading a little list. Yeah. And 3, the overreaction from the characters to player death and PKing seems a bit much. Like, it doesn't make sense to me as a game player, especially in the context of this world, because for players there's no permadeath. But I'll get to that again. Okay. Starting with being overpowered. Part of what I really liked about book 1 is that the characters were underdogs. They had the core group of characters had to start over at level 1 so they could use their fancy new immersion tech. They regularly faced off against players and monsters that are like 10 times their level, which isn't hard to level 1. Monsters level 10. Great. But they had to use their brains to kind of fight those characters and those monsters. They had to rework their powers into good combos to overcome that disadvantage. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about book 1. In book 2, they're overpowered, and it's not like their powers got any better. Some of them did, but their biggest overpowered ability is the same thing that Batman has: money. Money makes this group overpowered to a great degree. They have the money to build a whole keep, to get whatever materials they want, to hire hundreds of people or whatever they need to buy food, livestock, whatever the case is. And on each adventure they go through in book 2, they get so much money and so many new items that it's like the author has almost given them the ability to print money, especially for some of the new powers that they get. And so money to me it kind of makes the group overpowered in a lot of ways. Additionally, there's some good action in the story, but I never really felt like the group was in any danger of losing. And this kind of speaks to what Charles was saying, in that I never feared that the main character was going to die or that the other characters were going to die. Especially, there's never definitely a fear enough to merit the main character's over-exaggerated responses to player killers and to see his friends die. They're all players. If they were like NPCs and they die permanently, okay, I'd get that. But there are other players. So like, what is the big deal? Why is he screaming and like going on a sudden murder rampage every time like a player dies? You know what I mean? Because players respawn in like 10 minutes. So it just seemed like an overreaction. Did you want to chime in on any of the overpowerness?
Yeah, I had so much to say on this. Now, again, this is an amazing book. I loved reading it. I'm not just saying that because Dave is a good friend of mine, because I have totally trash talked some of my friends before, especially in public scenarios, on air, and so forth. Fox News interview, I have trash talked a friend. However, one of the things that bothers me the most about anytime I see a kingdom building, especially dungeon building, I got an MBA and because I love finances, but the one reason I got that because I love the constriction, the way you have to plan stuff around, the hard decisions you have to make, the sacrifices you have to make with every purchase, every decision you make. And as a person in real life, I have to decide, do I want a nicer car or do I want like to have an Xbox or a TV or something like this? Like, you have to make these decisions in real life. And I love to see characters make them in books. And I'm going to reference a book that will probably get me a little bit shouted out because it's not a lit RPG, but Game of Thrones book 1 did 2 of the things that I had an issue with on Greystone, like perfectly. And that was, you had to worry about money. Like, there was a very real consequence to the actions in terms of like, they were in debt. And so they ended up being beholden to people, and they ended up having to make these decisions that put them in bed with people that they did not want to associate with. And that's something that I would have loved to have seen with all the money they were throwing around. And then the second one is, and he couldn't have done this in book 2. You have to do this in the first book of a series, but he could have Ned Starked us. Wait, I hope you guys have read. Game of Thrones is so old and it's so popular.
Yeah. Explain that for me. Explain the Ned Starking.
Ned Stark was the perceived MC of the first series of Game of Thrones. We watched from the Starks. He comes down. It's like, it's our MC. This is the main character of the story. And we feel like he's invincible. We think he's going to come through. We think he's going to pull it out. I mean, other than the fact it was played by what? Sean Bean? Is that his name? The guy who dies in like every freaking episode of anything he plays in. Other than him being there, we had no idea that, because I read the book before I watched the show. All of a sudden, boom, he doesn't make it. There's no miracle. And that pulled you into a suspension where the rest of every book I read, I was scared. I was worried. And in fact, like if I look at like season 7, that's my biggest issue with it, is they took away from the Ned Starking. Like, you know what's going to happen. Like, I didn't worry about after they brought a certain person I didn't worry about what was going to happen with the next book because I'm like, oh, that character's fine because the audience loves him.
Oh, well, like season 7, if I'm not mistaken, there's no book for season 7. Right?
What?
There's no book,
but there is a season 7 is what I'm saying. Like
right.
The writers for the HBO have ruined it.
Right, yeah, and that's kind of the issue with book in season 7 as far as I'm aware, is that there's no book correlation. So the television writers kind of do whatever they want to.
Take over.
Yeah.
And HBO makes decisions based on franchising with merchandise and like selling like specific characters. They don't worry about the quality of the writing anymore. I wanted to see what would have made this book better, because I'm going to say the fighting scenes are my favorite parts of it. They are hands down incredibly well written. If you are like me, where you go to sleep at night thinking about how to write a good scene with somebody getting murdered, this is a great book. This is a wonderful pick. I would have loved to. I mean, come on. They've got some pretty cool stuff in there.
There's some very cool scenes. I'm not going to say that this book doesn't, like, we're talking about this book again, not Game of Thrones, right? We're talking about
Greystone. We're talking about the book.
Okay, so this novel has
scenes.
good action scenes. They're very nice. Again, some of the responses from the characters aren't the most realistic, but like the fight scenes are really cool. They're fine. They're good.
And then the second issue I had with it was, and this is into your thing, is I'm a PK. But it's not because I go into areas like, if I'm playing a game, like if I'm doing a D&D game, I don't kill my allies in the game, because that's not what people set out to do. Like they didn't join a game to PvP in this scenario. If I'm playing like I don't know, Monopoly, I'm not going to try to like ruin somebody's. Well, I would ruin somebody's day in Monopoly, but I'm going to do it financially. Like right. I'm not going to like trash talk or do anything like this. I try to role play the game I'm in. Worlds or medieval worlds, we think, I'm not saying it's the real case, but we think of them as incredibly violent worlds where people are killing and trying to be greedy and trying to get what they want. So when a character role plays that character that he's playing, like maybe he rolled an evil paladin and he has to go murder people, I would like to see him be able to do that without some random guy going, oh no, berserker rage because I hate the fact that this occurred. Like I want people to role play their characters, and I felt like he didn't understand, like maybe he didn't understand that was part of how games work.
Yes, I think that's one of the more common review criticisms of like the series in general is the main character and his group's response to player killing and player versus player combat. Like he's really like the main character in the story is like really anti player versus player, and anti PK. And like it seems like a disproportionate. It seems like a disproportionate response to the actions, and I'm like, it kind of jarred a lot of I think other readers. But it makes for a very interesting adversary, I guess, or at least a straightforward one.
I mean, it does add some of that, but you would like if you really hate PvP and PKing and stuff like that. It's like, why would you put yourself in these scenarios, kind of thing? Like, I personally have played, like I go to PvP games like World of Warcraft. When I played a paladin, so I didn't kill anybody in that game. I went around healing everybody. Like literally, even I played a PvP paladin, so I healed people, but I healed people in fights instead of actually attacking. Like I like to play the role that I'm given to the degree that I'm given it, and I generally like to randomize it because I am terribly indecisive when picking a character. So whatever I get, I want to make sure that that's the role I'm in. And I felt like he didn't part of the game. So that was a little bit of a critique for me. And you did touch on this for a second. I feel like it needs to be discussed more is MC Herbivore.
Expand on that.
You know the term herbivore man?
I don't think I'm familiar with that particular statement. Can you expand on that for me?
You know, okay, so I heard about this recently, and it's a weird phenomenon where there's a bunch of herbivore men in Japan. Men that do not go out and, engage with a woman. Oh,
you mean like eunuchs? Or
No, just never. They never get girlfriends and do stuff like that. I felt like this MC was starting to get too much influence from that. I felt like he could have been more. Oh, he could have handled his stuff.
See, I felt like the other direction. Like, why is he making these moves? Because he's been sheltered his whole life. As far as the backstory for the character goes, he had this. He has a disease. He has a congenital disease, I think it is, so he's been sheltered for a good portion of his life. So he hasn't been in social situations, except for like the connection to his best friend, who happens to be a girl. And so playing online games has been his way to interact and connect with people. So the fact that he had a love interest at all and then it went forward seemed weird, because it was not nearly as awkward as I thought it was going to be, or I thought it should have been, at least. His fact that he doesn't like jump on her made more sense to me than if he had, because it would have been even more out of context, at least from my point of view, because he doesn't have those social skills, as far as I'm aware of, as far as his backstory goes.
But he's had the social skills of interacting with a woman for quite a long time.
Sort of. Like, which woman are you talking about? Like his mom, who's dead, or like his best friend, who's the girl who's not interested in him? Yeah, I'd hoped that storyline would have progressed better. Like I'd honestly hoped that she would have been his love interest. The best friend you saw there the whole time, she becomes a love interest later on, as you see with some other dude or some other situation, and you realize you have feelings for her. That would have been a great storyline. Not what happened. Instead, we get.
He might have, I feel like Dave might have watched too much anime recently.
It could have been, but I could like those kind of.
I'm talking about, how they always ignore the best friend for the option. Like, anytime they build these harems, there's like that perfect girl that you would prefer.
Yeah. And
then that's never the one they pick, because they've got to pick that one girl that you're just like, come on, why would you be interested in this one?
Yeah, and in this particular case, that's kind of my next point in the review, is that the love interest in the story it's cute, I guess, but it felt like the character was specifically written just to be a love interest. Like, she shows up out of nowhere. The main character saves her, I guess. And then for the rest of the novel, like, everybody's trying to force her on him. And he's like, oh, I'm kind of clueless, but maybe not. I don't know. I kind of might have an interest in her. I'm not really sure. And then at the end, it goes somewhere. But it didn't feel natural to me. And again, I kind of stated my reasons why that relationship development just didn't feel like it clicked in my brain, like it made sense. And additionally, some of the comments the main character makes towards like women and relationships also seemed out of context to me. Like, he makes some statements like towards the dragon. And the show, like, oh yeah, don't always follow your woman. Like, they rule the world and we just follow them, or something like that, I think. And those kind of jokes didn't make sense to me, because like, those are the jokes of like a guy who's been married for 30 years. Yeah, but for the main character to make it, who's never been on a date, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And there's just like a few little things like that for me. But for the most part, the love section was just like, okay, that's cute. It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't ruin the story either, at least for me.
I can't comment too much. Like, I do want to go more, but I got in trouble a lot for the Stephanie choice in TVK1, so I tried not to be hypocritical here. But I do feel like something should have happened, girl, and it didn't happen, and now that's why you had this awkward encounter with a different one.
Right, that could be the case. Like I said, these are two authors kind of chatting, chewing the fat about storylines that could have been, but they're not in this race. But like I said, overall,
well, I mean, I always pick a character I want to win in terms of like the harem plots that you see, like where there's lots of women. If you see multiple choices for an MC to potentially pursue, I always pick which one I want to win like 5 seconds in. So I am very biased. Like, I'm reading this and I'm just like, that's the girl. Yeah. That's the girl he needs to hook up with. She brought him cookies, and cookies are delicious. We're done. That's it. I'm sold.
I think that's for, well, at least for me, I'm kind of the same boat. Like, I wanted that female character to win, his best friend, and up to this point, she is not. And I'm like sort of disappointed because my choice didn't get the main character, I guess, if that makes sense. Like I said, overall though,
it's like this other book I was reading where there was this girl that we spent a lot of time talking about, and she was like working with a store, and you're like, oh, something's going to happen here. Oh, we're seeing romance develop. And then bam, she's got a kid and nothing goes anywhere.
Oh, okay. So there you go. So like I said, story like that, lines like that happen. We don't know. Sometimes there's false leads or just different points in people's lives. You never know how these things pan out. Sometimes the author himself doesn't know how these things are going to pan out. You just don't know. Okay. Overall, though, I had a good time reading this story. This is kind of the summary section of the review. My favorite characters get extended parts. Every scene with Fibble, who's the goblin that goes pew pew, super fun and adorable. Definitely like his expanded role. The action is nice. The combat scenes again have varied opponents, plenty of new skill sets that are tested and shown off in the novel. I liked all the detail in the kingdom building and town building. Again, like with every story, I think there are things that could have been done better in the story. That's doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. Especially like with that plot tease that just didn't get fulfilled at the end at all. That's a different issue though. But those, again, things did not stop me from enjoying the story. I had a good time with it. It gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. That's against Greystone Chronicles Book 2, The Dire Lands, with a score of 7 out of 10. And that's it. That's the end of the show, folks. Charles, thanks for hanging out with me, man, and for chiming in. It was a very interesting experience to have someone on the show who was not me on the general podcast. Like I said, it's a new experience for both of us and for the audience. We'll see in the comments if they liked it or not.
No, they won't. So I probably won't see you again.
That could be the case. I don't know. We'll wait and see what they say. Again, folks, if you're reading and watching this, feel free to chime in on whether you like the format this time around, whether you liked it more, whether you liked it less, whether you want to see more Charles. Maybe he'll come out a regular correspondent. I don't know. It's up to you, folks. So vote now whether Charles lives or dies. Okay, but that's it.
Yeah. And on top of that voting, you should really check out that Greystone Chronicles book 2. And I mean, it's just a really good one. And what is it? You need to give heck about Raymond when this book comes out. There'll be a specific plot point. You need to just lay into him about it. You'll figure it out when you read it.
Yeah, when that book ever comes out, that's part of Alpha.
First, and then talk to him about it.
Yeah. We can talk about it when it actually comes out, whenever that's going to be. But that's it for the show, everybody.
I get you like a quick cover in like 5 days.
No, I have some cover art. It's just that it's not finished, and my cover artist does amazing work, so I don't mind waiting for it. There's no rush for me. I'm not getting this income for like till next year. So there's not like any press for me to like put it out today or anything. It's just
there's no rush for you, but what about that reader, man? If you read one book and you read another book and you feel like, oh, Raymond's got a book coming out, but he's not, because this art's taking a while. Like you realize how much torture that is for a reader to like find out that your book's
this is a different series too. Like this isn't Adventures on Terra. This is an entirely different series that nobody basically knows
about.
I'm saying,
you know how annoying it is to find out that a book that you really want to read because an author that you wrote or that you read likes or wrote it, and then you're sitting here like it's not going to come out because a cover artist is delaying. It's like finding out that book 7 is not going to come out in the series because people have real lives.
Yeah, but there have been no plans for my book to come out at any particular time point. It's just like, oh, I got some extra time to do some editing on it, and now it's just formatted and ready to upload. It's just I got to get some cover art. I'm also putting out an audiobook at the same time, so that's already in production. So the fact that the book is delayed a little bit is not the worst thing in the world. But it'll be like a shorter time frame between book release and audiobook release, at least. So some people will be happy about that. So I'm just like, oh, it is what it is. I'll just leave it here and go start working on Adventures on Terra book 3. So it's just stuff.
Or this one's, book 2, just throwing it out there.
Could be. But that's it for the show, everybody. We're really stopping now. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. If you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to do so at LitRPGPodcast.com. You can also find Charles on Facebook. I don't remember if you have a Twitter or if you have I don't think you have a webpage, right?
I actually started a Twitter for like one of my graduate courses in marketing, and then I have never checked it.
Yeah, well, there you go. I don't think it's considered.
They made me start a Twitter and like a Reddit and like all of these things, and I'm like, oh man, I'm totally gonna use these. I've never touched them, and I just work on Facebook and love this LitRPG Society group. It's a really good group on Facebook. People should always go to that one. Yeah, there's also the LitRPG regular group. Oh yeah, LitRPG regular one too, and also LitRPG books and a few others on top of that. But again, you can also find us at Facebook. Wait, what's LitRPG books? Do you have a link? That's the one that was started by the Russian group, the one who does Vasily Mihenko's. I think it's actually started by Magic Dome Books, who does the translating for Vasily Mihenko's Way the Shaman series. Just shoot me a link after the podcast. Let's not spend too much time. Yeah, it's just LitRPG Books. It's a different group. They're not as active as the other groups, but it is what it is. But again, if you're joining the podcast, we have a website, litrpgpodcast.com, Facebook page, Twitter. Go hang out with us. There it is. Thanks again for hanging out with me, folks. Thank you, Charles, again for taking the time to chime in on everything and to be here. I know you have sleep and work and you got a day job, so thank you very much for taking your time. Remember, folks, until we can meet again, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.